So what collaborative problem solving is all about, really, I think, when it comes to dismantling the school to prison pipeline, is it's really about trying to interrupt bias. And it's interrupting explicit bias and implicit bias. Because the reality is, I think, when any student struggles with their behavior, there's this bias around it where people explicitly assume that that behavior is willful on the kid's part, that they're doing this on purpose, that they're trying to get things or get out of things. And that leads people down a punitive path. And that's true with any kid's behavior. But then when it comes to students of color, they're subject to what I call sort of double jeopardy of behavior bias, because there's the explicit bias of that we think any student who's struggling with their behavior is doing this on purpose. But then with students of color, there's this assumption that there's even more reason to believe that this is willful behavior on the student's part. And then, of course, what we all know is the students of color are subject to far more harsher, more punitive discipline for far lesser, infractions than their white peers. So they're getting hit with explicit and implicit bias. And what collaborative problem solving is about saying, hey, wait a second, this is not a lack of will. No way. This is a lack of skill. That actually, when any student's struggling to meet the expectations at school, that student would prefer to be meeting the expectations, because students do well if they can, not students do well if they want to. Every student wants to succeed. And so if they're struggling, it's about a lack of skill, not will. And the best thing you can do is listen really hard to that student. Understand their perspective, their point of view, what's hard for them. And then you can share yours and you can put your heads together to try to collaborate to solve the problem. And that's sort of the fundamental basis of collaborative problem solving. But of course, the thing is, teaching teachers and administrators those strategies doesn't work so well unless there's real leadership around it, unless the leaders are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and establishing the kind of culture that supports it. And I think that's where this work really starts to get some traction.
In my district, it's just a known fact that there are more white school leaders in schools than school leaders of color. It's about 8% school leaders of color. Within my research, I really wanted to look at the impact specifically that Black school leadership had on schools where the majority was students of color, specifically Black students, and what they brought to the table that was different within other schools that did not have that style representation, in terms of what was the rate of academic success, what was the rate of students not having suspensions or demerits every day, what was the rate of parent communication. And I wanted to get to the root of the why. Why did they do this? Why was this important to them? The first thing that I found, which supported the Black school leaders raising their school culture or wanting to develop a school culture that was supportive of students of color, is because they didn't have that growing up. And if you think about the journey of a school leader. So you are a student, you go to middle school, high school, college. Now you have to have a master's degree in education. And a common theme was all of them had a specific struggle within school, but they had someone that looked like them, that believed in them, that did not smack a punishment on them every chance they got, but actually listen to them and help them reach the next phase. 100% of the school leaders that I did my data survey on said they had a person that looked like them that led them to success.
And I'm curious, Tia, was that your personal experience?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Middle school is where it got really murky, and my mom was a teacher. But guess what? I struggled. I didn't want to embarrass her. I have a specific teacher in 6th grade. I wrote an essay on aerodynamics, and I loved that topic. She told me I didn't write it. And I went to school in an environment where I was the only one of 2, maybe 3, if I was lucky, Black students in my class. And so even though my parents stuck up for me, my parents didn't have to go to school every day. I did. So I was confronting the person that told me I was inadequate. And it silenced me. It took away my growth mindset. It took away my will to want to succeed. And so that transferred into my 7th and 8th grade year. But when I got into high school is when I started having teachers that were listening to me, unpacking things with me. Not as much as when I went to an HBCU, but it started. So my mentality towards education started changing. And for my sample that I used for my research, that happened to a lot of the school leaders now. One specific woman was pregnant in 10th grade. And she thought, I'm going to have to get kicked out of school. I'm going to be in school with a big belly. And a school leader who was a Black man told her, oh, no, me, you, and the baby, or we're going to get through this. And she ended up being the principal of the school at which she got pregnant.
That is amazing.
Because she wanted to give back. So then I'm looking at my own life, some representation in my research. We had that culminating experience all the time at an HBCU. They do not kick you out. It's not punitive. They want you to be there. You see all these slogans now on these T-shirts and things. 49% of Black dentists came from an HBCU. 75% of this Black lawyers came from an HBCU. It's because that growth mindset is built up because we were not penalized for things we didn't know or having a challenging behavior, or those professors in those spaces, they want to know how to help you in terms of unpacking that with you. And maybe, you're a first generation college student and you don't have any money. That is a stressor because you're thinking in yourself, how am I going to even pay for this? And why am I here? Instead of kicking the student out of the school, they say, let me figure out how I can get you, work study. So my goal is bringing that into elementary and secondary education, those type of experiences.
Right. Because it sounds like what you found at HBCUs is that there was this mindset, the grounding mindset of, you know what, my job is to help you succeed because I know that everyone here wants to succeed. And there are all kinds of barriers that are getting in the way. And we need to identify what those are, but then we can help. And we can help you to succeed. And you're trying to bring that foundational mindset and perspective to elementary school, to middle school, et cetera. And that's, I think, where your work in collaborative problem solving comes together, because collaborative problem solving says, oh, you don't know how to do that? Here's a philosophy you can hold on to. And here's a process with some concrete, actionable things you can do to try to figure out what's getting in the way for a student so that you can leverage their natural desire to be successful and not go down that punitive route that is unsuccessful and gets in the way of building the kind of relationships that it sounds like you found are the biggest indicators of success too.
When a student is given a punitive reaction from a troubling behavior, they don't learn anything from it. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. They learn that this is bad, I'm going to get in trouble, but they don't learn anything else from it. And so their confidence is already knocked. When if you're taking a challenging behavior and building up the steps for them to reset themselves, here are the action steps, here are the skills. What do you think about it? Giving them voice and choice in that process, that's what helps them. That's what pushes them forward. And for a lot of times, students of color in specifically urban schools, they're not given that choice. They're not given that option. Somebody is dictating to them what happens next when I make a mistake.
Right.
And that's where that explicit and implicit bias comes in. So explicit bias, it is there, the person is thoroughly aware, of the action. The implicit bias is based on experience. And what I found in education, that sometimes the experience is I've worked with students of color, they are at risk. So whatever their interpretation of at risk is, they're automatically assuming that the student is going to be in trouble. They put it in their troubled student. They don't realize at risk could be truancy. It could be maybe their parent didn't get them to school on time and they're labeled at risk because they have a couple of late marks that was over the amount. So we're not assessing those small things, but with collaborative problem solving, and I think giving the student that voice, they're able to say, this is what happened, this is why, and now support me in building the skills so I can get to the next phase. And punitive measures or suspension, that is taken completely away. It's not a restorative practice. It doesn't restore the child. I want to speak to one specific student who is autistic. And when he was in elementary school, he was chastised so often due to his disability that he had no trust in teachers. The no trust in teachers caused him, you could tell him, put your pencil away. It was like fight or flight. So it's, do I fight with this teacher? Do I run away? Do I not get my learning? And of course, that creates that non-trusting environment creates a conundrum of the student never getting what they need, right? So when they came to my place of learning, middle school, we changed the trajectory of how he has relationships with teachers. And sometimes the student, when they go from a non-trusting environment to an environment that has trust, they're completely thrown off. So the 6th grade time, they're trying to fight or flight us. And it takes us a while to say, no, own this you own it. We're just guiding you. We're facilitating, right? So then when he gets to Boston Prep, where collaborative problem solving is used all the time, he's a Red Sox scholar. He got honor roll. They invited our teachers to come to his honor roll celebration in National Honor Society. We're working together, and hopefully we'll be able to stay in his life through college to get him there. And I think that's another part of the process, is staying the course. Punitive behaviors is one and done. Staying the course, letting the child know, you can trust me. I'm not going to let you go.
And Tia, I think one of the things you're talking about too is it takes time. You don't build trust overnight, especially when a student like that has been on the receiving end of punitive discipline for a while. Mm-hmm. That distrust isn't dismantled easily. And the thing about school is, as soon as you develop a trusting relationship, you're off and on to the next grade where you've got to develop it with someone else again. So it's not until you have a whole school climate that really emphasizes building trust and relationship with students that it takes hold to the point where it can transfer from year to year and then from setting to setting, which is amazing to hear what you saw with that particular student.
Yes. And part of just building that trust is taking away the label. And I think that's why it's so important for teachers, administrators to really understand what a label can do to a student, to a child. And labels can carry with somebody on and on for their whole life. And it dismantles them. It dismantles them. So
my grandfather, who's 104, he was born in Tupelo, Mississippi in the beginning of the century. He always said to me, if you give a dog a name, eventually they'll answer to it.
Yes.
Give a dog a name, eventually they'll answer to it. You teach a kid that this is the label, this is how they're defined, and eventually they'll start to, talk and act and experience life that way. So, and that's why it's so important, the lens through which we look at these students and what we teach them, we think about them and what we believe about them.
And it's good to look back or align yourselves with people or school communities. That's why my connection with Boston Prep is so strong, because we're in alignment in the trajectory of where we want our students to go. And we're open to pushing the envelope and saying that actually didn't work. Those punitive measures do not work. Look at the data, assess the data, look at what's going on now. Look at the school to prison pipeline. Look at who's there. Who's there is our students from 2nd and 3rd grade.
You got it.
Yeah. So just acknowledging that and aligning yourself with people that are going to do the work and sustaining school culture that sets the tone for positive trajectories for students.